saw the cover up of History of Phoenix, Arizona, Volume 1 book. And what he does, he covers the Phoenix Lights, petroglyphs in the sky, and that's the landscapes of the spirits. And then he gets into, these are all true stories, and they're legends also from the Indian nation there around that area. He'll explain that to you. He gets into a lot of petroglyphs that the Indians have drawn, and it's actually a kind of an artwork, and Jeff has caught on to it very well. I've had him on shows before a couple of times, and very interesting. And he's got a huge book. The first book we talked about a couple of years ago was huge, and this one here, Volume 1, I haven't seen, the book, but I know basically what it covers, the synopsis of it, and what he's going to get into with his talking points. So he's actually a self-trained archaeologist. He's an author, and he's been researching for years. Most of his life, he's been intrigued and he's investigated a lot of his local area. I won't give you his town or place where he lives. I never do that. But it's Arizona, and and he does research in Phoenix a lot. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, because once Jeff starts talking, you'll know he knows what he's talking about. He knows it right down to the nitty gritty. He's very detailed. So we're just going to turn him loose. And welcome aboard, Jeff Woolwine.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
And is there anything you want to mention that's going on right now with you? Are you involved in anything? Said something about a documentary.
Let's see, documentary. You have to refresh my memory on that one.
Hey, I thought you were working on that with a crew or something, but maybe might have got you crossed up. But what's going on? You're still researching, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, you can never, stop learning about, what UFOs are, what the Phoenix Lights is, and things like that. So yeah, it's just great. I've been doing this for over 20 years now. I was born in Phoenix, and I've been seeing these UFOs ever since I was a kid. So, once I started growing up, I'm starting to see, more and more of them in the sky. So it just made me go on a hunt, on a quest to find out exactly what is going on in my city, Phoenix.
Right.
And lo and behold, once I found what was really going on, and I had proof evidence of this, I was just astonished, and I was really kind of blown away with it all, because it's not what everybody thinks.
Right. Yeah. Right over my left shoulder, there's a shirt I hung up, and it says, "I believe." And it's got a flying saucer. My brother-in-law bought that for me years ago. And I've been, always been an experiencer for all my life. So we talked about that, but this is your show. And I'm really interested in what you're finding out more. I know we talked about petroglyphs and the Indian tribes, but I know you got new stuff to tell us. So why don't you let us in on that?
Well, as he said, so the full book is out there now. You can find it on Amazon Kindle. And it goes into the real history of Phoenix, not what the archaeologist wants you to believe, but proven facts, evidence. Anywhere from colored photographs of explaining how things are going in the story that you're reading, to documents found in the downtown city downtown city library that explains on what the real history is of Phoenix, told from the first park ranger, Charles Holbrook of South Mountain in Phoenix, Arizona, from the early 1930s to the late 1940s. Now, in his journals, he talks about something completely different on what the archaeologist wants us to believe. It explains on who the Hohokam were, where they disappeared to, because we don't know what happened to these people. They were here for 1,000 years, and all of a sudden they just simply vanished. It disappeared, wiped out from the face of the earth with no trace of where they went. Now, the archaeologist wants us to believe that they simply migrated somewhere else because of drought. Well, if this was the case, then where did they go? There's no evidence on where these people went, except the only evidence that we can verify, if you will, is through the oral tradition of what the Native Americans say orally, passed down from generation upon generation, and also what the petroglyphs say about who these people were, what their everyday life was, and who they dealt with, and what happened to them.
Yeah, what about
And
is that closely associated, Jeff, with the Anastasi's disappearance?
oh, absolutely, yeah. This is fascinating stuff. So it's like these people were here for 1,000 years, and they just simply vanished, and it all seemed to recognize or go inside with the same tribes from other places around the world where they were masters of their land for 1,000 years, and all of a sudden they disappeared. Well, it happened, in my opinion, in looking at the document.
Yeah, we just had a glitch. That's
Okay,
we'll resume.
okay, yeah. So I mean, it was it totally coincided with not only what happened to the Hohokam people, but also what happened to the other tribes around the world that were here, and then all of a sudden they disappeared.
Yeah, you're talking about the other archaeologists. Now you're a self-trained archaeologist, and you've had some training in it, but you went ahead and did your own thing. So you're opposing what a lot of these archaeologists are saying, what really happened with the history in Arizona, right?
Oh yeah, we have to look at what the evidence says.
Yeah.
We have to look at what the landscape says on the mountain. We have to look at what the petroglyphs are showing us, because these are prehistoric photographs. They didn't have video cameras or any way to record these things except on the places on where the events took place at. So, such as these mountains uh, that these events had taken place at, and so they're carving what had happened in the place where you see the carving at. So, if we, for instance, um, here's a perfect example. So, when we're looking at the petroglyphs, when we're examining the art, we have to look at the whole landscape because the artist is putting the landscape in with the art. For instance, so a lot of these petroglyphs, and I'm sure you've seen these before, doing your hiking trails and things. There's petroglyphs high up on a hill, right? We see a big petroglyph panel, and it's high up on a hill, and it's probably marking a spiral. We'll get into that here in a minute, and something, let's say, a circle next to that spiral. Okay, and so it's carved high up. Why is it carved high up? Because the artist is trying to tell you, look, I saw something and it was in the sky. And the only way to explain this to generations upon generations in my way is to carve it in the sky. So he finds a place where he saw this thing in the sky at. And so he climbs up there and he carves exactly what he saw in the sky. To us, it's a UFO sighting. It's an orb in the sky. And so he's telling us, I saw this in the sky because you have to look up to see it. Now, there's a lot of petroglyphs on South Mountain. For instance, there's a lot of pyramid hills out there, and these pyramids are sacred to the Hohokams. And so there's one, for instance, where this rock art panel and is in front of this pyramid. And you'll notice, I show this in the book. There's photographs of this in the book. You'll notice that there's what looks like a snake, okay? And he's doing a pyramid zigzag formation. It looks like a pyramid, okay? And there's something in the middle, in the valley of these two pyramids. And so when you step back from that panel and you look, it's right coincident with these two pyramids that this petroglyph is carving. So he's trying to tell us that he saw this object in between these two pyramids. This is one way to understand the rock art.
How large are these pyramids? I know there's been several people, Jeff, that has made comments about you coming on, and they said that they've lived in that area and they're very interested in what you got to say. How large are these pyramids?
So they're huge. I mean, they're big. Pyramids. There is a hill on the White Tank Mountains just west of Phoenix. Now, this hill is very interesting. It looks like some of the covered up hills that we find in Mexico. This is how they found some of those pyramids. Is when the people left, they buried these pyramids. They buried them full of dirt. And there's a hill out there on the White Tank Mountains that looks exactly like the stuff that we find in Mexico. And I'm sure that there's a pyramid there. I mean, after all, I mean, the Holocaust weren't the only people here. It was the Mayans also, and there's plenty of rock art to suggest this around the valley, that not only the Holocaust but the Mayans were here from Mexico. And this only makes sense because this part of the Western world was a part of Mexico back in the time. So it just wasn't the Holocom Indians; it was the Mayans also that was here in the Valley of the Sun.
Okay. Now, Holocom,
And now,
that's a tribe that you don't hear much about. When did they start? Do you know when they really started their presence in that area, and when did they leave?
well, the archaeologists are telling us that they were here around at least about anywhere from 15 to 1700 years ago.
Okay.
And so, and they were masters of the land here. They were the first ones to make canal systems. As a matter of fact, our canal systems were using pretty much the same grid as the Holocoms did, just a little bit more advanced with concrete and a little bit deeper. But we're still using what the Holocoms are chiseled out in the ground back in the day. And so the story on this from the first park ranger of South Mountain. Now let's go into this guy real quick. So his name is Charles Holbrook, and he was the first park ranger from 1930s all the way up till the late 1940s. Now he just wasn't, I mean, a park ranger for Phoenix. I found this guy in documents all over the West Coast, from California, Utah, New Mexico. This guy was a famous guy, and he was a big guy in his field, so to speak. I mean, he was very well known. He was very popular, and so he just wasn't some Joe Blow off the streets being a custodian at South Mountain, being a park ranger. No, this guy, he had a lot of back pull to him. I mean, he was very popular and credible. He's very credible. And so in his journals that I discovered in the library, um, it talks about who the Hohokam people were. Now, his journals say that when the first Hohokam people lived here, they didn't know how to live here. Now, it wasn't a dried up landscape as it is today. It was a tropical like landscape. It wasn't all dry and desolate in a desert as we see it now today. And evidence of this is clearly can be seen through the weathering on the rocks and the waterfalls down the mountains. And so we can clearly see that this wasn't a dried up area, that this was at one point in time over 1,000 years ago, a lot, tropical, more grass, more trees, more palm trees, whatever you want to call it. But it wasn't a desert, right? It wasn't a desolate desert. So, and in my opinion, how did it got here? In my opinion, because this is how I found the Phoenix lights, is they followed these lights to this area, to South Mountain. And South Mountain is a sacred mountain. Hopefully we have enough time to get into that. And so, in my opinion, because I did the exact same thing, I followed these lights in the sky to the mountain. I believe this is how the Holocoms arrived in this valley, is because they came to this mountain. Now they lived here for 1,000 years. The masters of their canal systems, and the archaeologists wants us to believe that they never went to war with anybody, that they were peace-loving people, and suggesting that I don't see any evidence that they did go to war except for something completely different, not man-made.
They did leave some of their technology behind, like you said, the canals and things. Do you think they were taught that technology from somebody up above? The lights?
Well, see, here's the thing. Here's the thing. So the archaeologist says that when the first people arrived here, they didn't know how to live. So the spirits of the earth and sky came up out of the sand world, came down from the heavens, and taught these people how to survive, how to live. Mm-hmm. And in return, because there's evidence all over the rocks out there, in return, they worship these things as a type of god. So the same stuff that we're seeing in Mexico as the Mayans and the Quetzalcoatl and things like this, and the sacrificing going on, that was going on here in Phoenix also. There was so much evidence of altars oriented towards the east, and those of you who understand what I'm talking about. It's oriented towards the east during the equinox and the solstice and things like that. And so, yeah, the same stuff that was going on in Mexico, the same stuff was going on here. And Charles Holbrook goes to write that all nations, all tribes from all nations used to come to this valley, used to come to the Valley of the Sun, to South Mountain. And they named South Mountain at that time Mount Sapoa, Mountain of Mercy. Now, the story goes on to say that it was a handful of gold for a handful of corn. And they used to, I found evidence high up on hills where it's like a type of amphitheater where a group of people could sit and watch down below everything that was going on, and also watch the sky, because they were sky watchers also.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were watching these things, watching the Phoenix Lights, watching all these other creatures that were here. In return, they were teaching them how to survive, things like this. And everything was going fine as long as the blood was being poured down blood being poured down the rock as a type of sacrifice. The sun would, continue to go in the sky and things like this. Everything was normal until one day, for reasons unknown, the sacrificing had stopped. And when that did, that's when things started to dry up in the valley. It was the water stopped flowing, things like this, and the people were asking their leaders, "Why did you stop the sacrifice? Look what's going on." I'm having an incident here. Can you hold on for just a second?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I've talked to Jeff before. My audience out there that's interested in all this, he's busy right now. I guess he had a knock on the door, but I've talked to a lot of people and they say that they really like Jeff, and I've had him on my shows a couple of times, and he's a great guy and he knows quite a bit about the Native American Indian culture in that area. And also he talks about the Hopi and Anasazi. We get into the Incas in the Central America and Mexico. And a lot of those tribes also disappeared, as he was saying.
My apologies. Hopefully, you can edit that out. But
no, that's
okay.
Okay. So I was kind of explaining what you studied with all these Indian tribes and things, and some of the disappearances in Central America and South America and Peru. A lot of tribes have disappeared and they just up and gone. But this 1,500 years ago, when they had trees and they had a little bit more water than they do now, that wasn't part of the ice age. That wasn't old enough to be part of the ice age or any of the glaciers or anything. So what changed? Was there a weather change that did this?
Well, what happened to their disappearance? Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, but also I'm asking you why it changed weather-wise, why they lost a lot of their crops and vegetation. And
well, I mean, the oral tradition says, like what we're talking about now. Of course, there's a scientific, the scientific says, the scientific authorities or whatever say that, because of, the climate change and things like that, what's going on now.
Right.
But the oral tradition tells us, and the rock art tells us, that when the sacrificing had stopped, the people was screaming at their leaders, "Why did you stop the sacrifice? Look what happened. The water stopped flowing. Everything is drying up. Why did you do this?" And so the oral tradition says that one day they looked up towards the east, and the devil came from the east and took these people away. Now, this coincides with what the petroglyphs are talking about. So this is talking about these creatures coming down and taking people up into the sky. Okay, this is what the petroglyphs are showing. And when you look at my website and you look at my book, you can see photographs of this. And so, and Charles Holbrook, right? Why would Charles Holbrook write all this, right? Why would he write this? He's saying, because he learned this from the Native Americans who was with him at the time. Okay, they told him what's going on, and this is what they told him. This is what he wrote. And he's saying that when all this was happening, there were some that were afraid and they hid in caves, right? And they watched what was going on. They watched their people being taken away by the Phoenix Lights, okay, by these things in the sky. And they were afraid, they were terrified. And when it was all over, they screamed to their to their leaders, look what happened, look what you did, look. And the leaders, they went to the sacrificing table and they cut out their own hearts on the sacrificing table. And the people vowed never to live in this valley again. They cursed this land because they knew if they were going to continue to live in this valley of the sun, that eventually they would have to go back to war with these spirits, with these phoenix lights of the earth and the sky. So they packed up all their stuff. Now, Charles Holbrook writes, he says that they buried the gold. They buried gold in South Mountain. And he says the gold was as tall as the
Yeah,
and they put all this gold in these tombs. Now, in my explanation or my hiking South Mountain for for over 20 years now, I've found a lot of tombs. Okay, a lot of things that are suspicious to me, that resembles something that is buried there, especially in these either man-made pyramid hills or natural hills. There's something in this. I explain this in the book. And so they buried all this gold in the mountains, and they vowed never to come here again. And so they went back to their homeland, Mexico. And so for hundreds of years, nobody lived in this Valley of the Sun.
Wow.
And so there was tribes on the outskirts, and they saw the phoenix lights. They saw these things in the sky, and they were afraid because they knew what had happened to the people, to their ancestors. So they wasn't going to do anything with this. As a matter of fact, this type of information is very taboo. This information does not talk about. Okay, this is the reason why we don't know about this, is because it's been covered up for at least 80 years now. So and Charles Holbrook, he told people this. He actually had a little flyer, and you can find this flyer in my book and on my website, and that he passes out to people. And the flyer, the booklet that talks about what happened to the Hohokam people, who talks about who these people were. His headline says the lost city of Cibola, the lost city of gold. Now, the archaeologist doesn't even want to admit that the Spanish conquistadors was even in the Valley of the Sun. But Charles Holbrook proved this, that they were. There's a petroglyph carving out there of one of the Spanish kings that was there. There's so much evidence that the Spanish was here. In my book, you can find evidence that we discovered out there on South Mountain from the Spanish.
I've heard several documentaries talk about the Spanish being up in that valley and being up in New Mexico and all around Utah. Now you had a real, I guess, description of what those Phoenix lights really were. You said they were coming down and picking up these people. What did those entities look like? Did they ever draw them as a petroglyph? And what was that? What was the Phoenix lights?
Oh, absolutely. For for so many years, we've been talking about spaceships and crafts and things like this. And so going into this, I'm thinking the same thing. I'm thinking I'm going down this path. I'm going down this journey. Right. I started in 2004. And I'm seeing the Phoenix lights. I'm recording them, and they're showing me where to go. I basically followed them to South Mountain. And in 2004, in 2005, after I did a numerous news reports in Phoenix, and in 2004, talking about the sightings that I'm filming, they all said that it was flares. Well, my investigations and all the studies I've been doing, these things like mountains, right? Mountains seem to be the key. So in 2005, I moved to South Mountain. I moved to South Mountain on the east side, about a mile away, high enough above the trees and everything where I could see the mountain. I sat there for 3 years. And so then I started seeing these day things, right? And so we're still thinking technology. We're still thinking spaceships and green men and gray guys from another planet and stuff. And that's what I'm thinking too. And so I see in 2005, I see this object come out of the sky and seem to go and land on South Mountain. And so I filmed it. I saw it. I filmed it. So the next day I explored. I go out there to find out exactly where this thing went down at. And I'm expecting to see a crop circle or some kind of evidence that a spaceship landed there. What do I find? I find a rock with spirals on it and an orb right above this spiral, the exact same thing that I filmed the day before. And so it just blew my mind. Wait a minute. Okay. That's just, I mean, that was crazy. Now, before I started doing this, I remember seeing a Native American who worked at one of the Indian museums down here. A very credible guy. He's a shaman, and I remember seeing him on a public access channel here in Phoenix. And he's up on South Mountain and he's talking about the petroglyphs. And one of the people that he was with turned around and says, "Hey, that stick figure man looks like he's looking up at something above his head." And Dave, that was his name, Dave turned around and says, "Yes, that is part of some of the interpretations out here, is that our ancestors saw and recorded things in the sky." And so this is 2004 when I first saw this, and the supposed 1997 Phoenix Lights happened in 97, and yet nobody was putting this together. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. So we have strange lights in the sky now, and now we have strange markings on the rocks. I said there has to be a connection. So in 2005, after I had discovered the petroglyph and the spiral and the orb out there that I filmed the day before, I remember seeing Dave on TV. So I got a hold of him, I called him up, didn't tell him who I was, didn't tell him what I was doing. Because and I kept all that to myself. I told him that I'm interested in the petroglyphs. I saw him explaining what the petroglyphs are, and I would like to film you. Can we go up on the mountain and can I film you talking about explaining to me the true meanings of the petroglyphs? So we spent about 3 hours out there, and he was going into some crazy stuff. Okay, and a lot of it was going over my head at the time. And especially when it came down to spirals. Now he says spirals are a symbol for an emergence point, for a vortex, if you will. It's like you're looking down into a hole. Now he says that when that spiral ends in a crack of the boulder, the crack of the stone, he says that crack is the emergence point, is the place where the spirits are going down into the underworld. He says when the spiral ends up, he says there's a vortex in the sky. He's like, there's a door, and that's exactly what he said. He says there's a vortex in the sky. And so I'm thinking, oh wow, at the time I'm like, well, how can a big spaceship technology craft get into a crack that size of the mountain, of the boulder there, until days later when I actually saw what he was talking about. This object came out of the sky and absorbed itself into the stone. It went down into the mountain. And I'm like, oh my goodness, holy cow, this isn't a myth here. This isn't some folklore. This isn't just some interpretation. This is correct what's going on. These things are going in South Mountain. Now, after a while, I mean, these things knew I was there. Like I said before, they showed me where to go. These things were in front of me. I followed them to South Mountain. They knew I was coming. I can't explain anything else. I don't go on coincidences. I believe everything happens for a reason.
Right.
And these things showed me where to go. And I sat there for like 3.5 years by South Mountain with my video camera, and I watched that mountain for many, many years. And the more and more I watched it, the more and more, and they were coming right up to me. Those of you that has been following me ever since 2005 know that these things are leaving South Mountain and coming right over me and going right past my windowsill. You can see that in my videos. And when they were doing this,
what shape were those craft, Jeff?
Well, I'm getting into that. And I soon realized that, I mean, because especially one, so well, I learned that some of these petroglyphs has the power to invoke the spirits. And I accidentally did that one time. I was sitting in front of a petroglyph high up on a hill next to a canyon. And there's tons of spirals on that canyon, meaning that canyon is a doorway. That whole canyon down the side of South Mountain is a doorway. And there were some petroglyphs there. And so I'm like, hey, you guys are cool. Why don't you come and see me? Well, like 2 days later, okay, and on top of this canyon was a carving of two men looking up at a flying snake.
Flying snake.
So a flying snake, right? A flying dragon, Quetzalcoatl, if you will. 2 days later, give or take 3 days later, not very long. It's in the morning, just at daybreak, and I'm watching South Mountain, and lo and behold, that canyon where I was there a few days ago, this red and black serpent came out of South Mountain and ascended in the sky.
Hmm.
He came out of South Mountain and went in the sky at about 1,000 feet. Then he changed directions and came right over me. I filmed this. This aired on one of the news stations in Phoenix, News Channel 3. This sighting was on News Channel 3 in Phoenix. And it came right over me, and it's moving. It's changing shape. Sometimes it looked like a cross. Sometimes it looked like a serpent. I mean, it was red and black, and it was right there. And I'm filming it, and I'm thinking to myself, this is not spaceships here. These are not crafts. What we're dealing with out here. These things are alive, right? These things are living beings.
Yeah.
I mean, and the more and more I started to learn about the petroglyphs, I soon realized that what we're dealing with is not crafts at all. They're not spaceships from another world. That these things are living entities, living beings. I mean, I have so many videos of the Phoenix Lights. I'm probably the only one that has at least maybe 350 videos of the Phoenix Lights, and now the day sightings, and oh my god, I mean, I was capturing some crazy stuff.
Yeah, you had a
And
DVD in 2007. Is that
right,
I looked it up and it's not for sale anymore. Is it still out there?
I'm not sure. I did a few documentaries with some people. I'm not sure what's still available out there, but my book is. My book is still photographs of taking still video clips of the sightings that I
Jeff,
had.
when you're talking about these entities, these actually the biological looking entities that disappear into the rocks, and also the spaceships that disappear, I go harken back to they can dematerialize or they can raise their frequencies and go through anything, just like the ETs go through walls and they're invisible in your house. That associates even with the smaller part of it, the micro part of it. You're talking about a macro where a huge ship or a huge animal or a serpent goes into a rock. Same.
Right, right, and I mean, I haven't found any evidence of the petroglyphs out there of any crafts. All right. I've been all over South Mountain. I've been all over the mountains of Phoenix, and not one depiction of a flying saucer, little green man with big eyes, none of that. Okay. But what I did find is living creatures, living entities. And this is what the Native Americans are telling us all these years, is that these things are shapeshifters. They're living beings, they're spirits, right? And I understand why they call them spirits, because when they're coming out of the mountain, they're like a ghost. You can see through them. As they climb higher in the sky, they become more solid. Same thing when they're coming down on the mountain. They're solid, they're changing shape, they're silent, they don't cast any shadows. You wouldn't even know that they're there unless you pay attention. And they come down, and then all of a sudden you can start to see through them, and then they just absorb themselves into the stone.
Yeah, if you want to make a Native American Indian nervous, all you have to do is start talking about shape shifting, right?
Oh my goodness. So yeah, that's a perfect point, because after I was done with Dave, and we're up there talking about the petroglyphs and things like this, he was all open. He was telling me all this information about the glyphs and about the Native Americans, about the spirits of the earth and the sky. He was all open to that until we got down off the mountain in the parking lot. And I was like, "Are you familiar with the Phoenix Lights?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, there was somebody on the news a few months ago talking about it." And I said, "Yes, that was me." He goes, "That was you?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, I'm working on this theory that the Phoenix Lights has something to do with the rock art out here on the mountains. Boy, when I said that, everything got shut down. He stopped talking to me. He won't go on the mountain with me anymore.
Really?
He won't contact my phone calls no more. That was it. That was completely it. Now, why? Why is that? Because the real indigenous people, the real Native Americans who understand this, who was taught by their ancestors. The true history of these things is what did we talk about in the beginning, that these things took these people away,
Mm-hmm.
that it wasn't a good thing, that these Phoenix Lights, that these things that we see in the sky was what was the leading cause of the Hohokam disappearance. Now, the Hohokam name is a Pima name, a Pima word, because the Pima tribe considered themselves ancestors to the Hohokam. Not only them, but also the Tohono O'odham tribe. Now, Hohokam is a Pima name for the people who got taken away, the people who are gone, the people who are missing, right? The
Mhm.
people who got taken away. And so they know what these things, you're right, it's taboo. Now, I've been talking to a lot of shamans, a lot of leaders, tribal leaders, and things like this. Now, some of them are trying to mislead me, but a lot of them, some of them don't want to talk to me, but the ones who do, they don't want to go on camera.
Mhm. Yeah, we had a big glitch there, ladies and gentlemen, the Dave Emmons show, and I got Jeff Woolwine here, and we were just in the middle of talking. I hope he remembers where he left off.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't believe that there's going to be any, disclosure. The government's going to come out and tell us that these things are here because of their history, because we have to look into the history of these UFOs. And is it a good thing? No. History tells us, I mean, when you really look into, what's going on, the petroglyphs, all the evidence points to that, these things aren't very good for us. I mean, but there are other manuscripts, ancient scrolls that do talk how these beings has helped mankind out in the past,
Mhm.
and so there are good ones, there are bad ones. But I believe the ones that we're dealing with here on South Mountain and also around the world is mostly not good ones. Okay. And so I think the new conspiracy now, because, for so many years, oh, they're filming flares. Oh, they're filming balloons, weather balloons. Oh, they're filming trash, this and that. The new conspiracy now is because everyone is seeing them, right? Everyone's seeing them now. So now they're gonna tell us, well, it's possible that these things are crafts. It's possible that this is some kind of technology. When they know, in fact, this is not technology that we're dealing with. No evidence. I'm sorry. I mean, crafts are all neat and wonderful and everything. And I'm waiting for the day to actually, but there's no evidence.
In your
There's no evidence of crafts.
in your opinion, where are they taking these people when they leave?
Right. That is a good question. So some of them got taken away, some of them didn't. They went back to Mexico. Where did they go? It's just very interesting. Like, I mean, in studying all this and studying the petroglyphs and and then going back and looking at some of these 3,000-year-old writings and manuscripts that talk about these beings, it tells us what these things are. It tells us that they got thrown down here to heaven. They say that Mount Hermon was the only mountain where these things got thrown, cast upon. But I believe that there was other mountains, South Mountain and other mountains around the world. These things ascended upon because they got kicked out of where they originally came from. And there's just so much evidence that, this is, biblical stuff. And I'm not talking about religion. Religion is out the door. But I'm looking at these manuscripts, and if you look at it as a history book of the world, it explains on what these things are. And so it's fascinating. We can read the manuscripts that was written, 3 to 4,000, even 7,000 years ago. And then we can go out on the petroglyphs and we can see the exact same story that these manuscripts are talking about. We're seeing the photographs of what these manuscripts are talking about.
Right.
It's talking about the giants. It's talking about the Nephilim. Okay, it's talking about all this stuff that we've already been reading that we've just been blowing off, right? But
Mhm.
yet the Native Americans and the people that understand all this, they recognize what is going on here. And so it's, these aren't crafts, these are living creatures, living beings. And here's the secret, they're not from another planet. This is their world also. They've always been here. So and when you look at it in this point of view, I mean, it all, kind of makes sense that this is their world also.
What now? I know a lot of people on like Ancient Aliens and all these other people that talk about now in Egypt and like the Native American Indians. When they saw something, they drew it, right?
Right.
I mean, they were drawing what they were seeing, and
Absolutely.
yeah, so that's what you believe in too, right?
Oh, sure. I mean, what? I mean, they're not out to try to sell a sci-fi book or some sci-fi movie. I mean, why would they do that, right? I mean, if they're going to draw a giant, that's telling us that they had a giant. They saw a giant. They're going to draw a snake above their heads. They're telling us that they saw a snake above their heads.
Right.
And it's for our generation, I believe. It's for generations, who understand this. because now we're seeing them. We're seeing them now. So we have to learn from the first people who dealt with these things. We have to learn from the petroglyphs. We have to learn from history. And there's been a big cover up here because after Charles Holbrook passed away, because he was open to this, he told people about this. He told people about the gold tombs up there. And as a matter of fact, in his journals, he writes on how he was chasing people away from these gold tombs on South Mountain. So it got to be a big problem there. And so after when he passed away, they collected all his information and they put it in the Phoenix Library for 80 years. They didn't talk about this anymore. And they made South Mountain a government park. So you start going up there and start digging stuff up, you're going to go to prison for 20 years.
Really?
Right. So yeah, why make South Mountain a government park? Why not make the Superstitions a government park? Why not make, the White Tank Mountains a government park? Why not make Camelback Mountain a government park? Why pick on South Mountain? Is because South Mountain is a holy mountain. South Mountain holds the key to the Phoenix Lights. South Mountain has the tombs where this gold is. Now, another tradition on the Phoenix Lights and this gold is that the Phoenix Lights is actually protect. They're waiting for the Mayans to come back and reclaim this. So this is supposed to happen again. All right, and the Hopis tell us that we're in the fourth world, we're about ready to enter the fifth. And each time each world changes, man screws up. So they got to start over again. And every time that man starts over again, these beings are here to help and guide mankind in their to live. But in history, it also leads to their downfall. So they're asking me, well, how come these things aren't making contact with us? Well, they're letting us know they're in the sky. They're letting us know that they're here. There is something here. How come they're not talking with us? Because it's not time yet. Okay, it is not time for these beings to come down and interact with man because we don't need them yet.
Right.
But if something was to happen, like a nuclear war or some kind of catastrophe, I can't even say that word. Something bad that happens, there's no food, there's no air to breathe, everything's contaminated, but they're going to see these lights in the sky. One's going to come down, he's going to shapeshift into a man, just like what the petroglyphs are talking about. And he's going to say, here, I'm here to help you. I can clean up the waters. I can clean up the air. I can give you food. I'm the one that you've been waiting for 3,000 years. And then it's going to start all over again. This is my opinion. This is the evidence that I'm looking at here. Like I said before, I started going down this one path, thinking spaceships and everything is cool. But all the evidence, the proof positive evidence is hitting me in the face. And now I'm going down this other road. I'm doing a total 180 on this. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is heavy. This is some scary stuff. And it is. It's very scary stuff. This is the reason why they're keeping this a secret. They don't want you to know about this stuff. They're not going to tell you that these are supernatural entities, that these are creatures, that God is real and God threw these beings down, on our earth, and they live here among us too. I'm not gonna come out and admit that, So they're gonna make you believe, well, okay, it's very possible because everyone's seen them now. Okay, so there's spaceships and it's technology, and they're gonna get away with that until eventually, the whole public is gonna know that these things aren't massive.
Why do you think the government benefits from all that? Are they seeking technology from these beings, or what?
No, they're waiting. So so in 2004, I'm filming the Phoenix Lights. Okay, I'm in Mesa Community College in Mesa on the east side of Phoenix. I'm filming these lights on the east side of South Mountain. And high up on the mountain, high up on these bleachers, I'm watching the lights, and I notice that these airplanes, these little white airplanes, are up high in the sky and they're circling. And when these lights appeared over a power plant, this power plant is bored down into the spotlight of South Mountain. We'll get into that here in a minute, hopefully about time. So this power plant is down there, bored into the fault line, and these lights are right over that power plant. The lights are absorbing the energy, basically, and these airplanes are there, and they're coming in. They're coming in after these lights. And I'm filming all this. I'm documenting all this. I'm watching it. And at first I thought, oh, cool. Somebody else knows that these things are here. Someone is out there to investigate them, and like I'm doing, someone is here to watch them. But I soon realized what they were doing is they're not here to investigate them. They're not here to watch them or investigate them. They're there to get them out of the area. They were shooing them out of the area. And sometimes it worked. Sometimes those lights were there, and these airplanes would come right up on them, and then the lights would softly disappear.
Yeah.
Airplanes would circle around in that area. Airplanes would go back up. Lights would come right back. It was a cat and mouse game the whole summer of 2004. So when I started, making the news, that's when it caught the attention of these airplanes. So now, not only are they watching the lights, they're watching me also. So in 2005, when I moved to the mountain, I am not only dealing with airplanes, I'm dealing with black helicopters now. And so these black helicopters are hanging around South Mountain. I documented this. I filmed this. You can see these helicopters in my book. And these helicopters are there watching for these things to come and go from South Mountain. Now, there is unconfirmed reports that in 1997, when the Phoenix Lights occurred, that the president at that time went underground. That they were afraid. Everybody was afraid. Why were they afraid? Why did they go underground? Well, I think because they're waiting. They know that eventually these things are going to come down and start over again, right? So they're watching me watch the lights, watch these things, but they're also waiting to see if I'm going to get taken away by these things, right? You see,
You were worried. You were worried too. You don't know
yeah.
what the government or the military might do if you get too
Oh yeah,
close.
I'm all over the net. I mean, I was doing this stuff way before Ancient Aliens. I was doing this stuff way before the UFO Hunter show.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I did the pilot for the UFO Hunter show and the Ancient Aliens TV series. I then later went on to do the UFO Hunter show in 2007. The episode is called Arizona Lights. Check it out. It's on Pluto on the Paranormal Channel. They've been doing a lot of reruns. So the UFO Hunter show, Arizona Lights. Check me out. I'm at the very end of the program, talking about the petroglyphs, talking about the rock art, and so I was doing this way before these shows was even a thought.
And I have to
And
remind people that you are boots on the ground. You go out and you
yes,
do this stuff.
yes,
You don't
I'm not
sit
just
back and
looking at.
research. Yeah, you go out and look at it. Yes.
Right. I am not just, taking hearsay evidence of a supposed mile wide V-shaped craft going over the city of Phoenix, going 8 miles an hour. Hundreds and thousands of people saw this, but nobody can videotape this. I don't go on hearsay. Okay. I go on what we can prove. I'm out there on the field. I'm doing the research. I'm checking out South Mountain. I've been back and forth on that mountain so many years. My knees are all broken because of it. Okay. It is that. So, and then I took it a step further. I called down a Native American to teach me the petroglyphs. This isn't my interpretation. This is what this information has always been here with us. We just have to go out there and look for it and find it and understand it. Then I took it a step further and I went to the library, the Phoenix Downtown Library, and asked and tried to figure out what they had to do with it. And I accidentally stumbled across this folder in the type of government file sections in the Phoenix Library, where it talked about, where I opened up the folder and there's Charles Holbrook. Now, a year before this, right, I'm finding tombs, I'm finding altars, I'm finding evidence of Mayans, I'm finding evidence of giants, I'm seeing petroglyphs of giants, all of this stuff. I'm finding altars, I'm finding all this stuff, right, that the archaeologist is not talking about. And yes, I bought his book. And a matter of fact, I actually brought the city archaeologist, out on a news story with me to talk about the rock art. And that didn't go very well, because he's not going to admit that there's altars.
I got to stop you. You mentioned giants, and you mentioned it in your books and in my notes here. What were the giants? Were they the Nephilim of old?
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Some of the petroglyphs now, they like to call some of these glyphs lizard men, because it looks like they have a tail. Mm-hmm. And they're huge. All right, they're huge compared to what a man would look like. I find evidence on how these somebody very big, very powerful, picked up these huge stones of rock and placed them in such a way, and teeter-totter. Check it out. It's in my book. They teeter-tottered these heavy boulders in such a way that during the equinox and the solstice, they would cast a shadow and it would make a design on the rock, on the petroglyphs. Some very sophisticated stuff. And I found evidence of huge, massive boulders or stone-cut bricks, like we see in Egypt, made out of a huge wall on South Mountain. Okay, so there's evidence that somebody big, very big, very powerful was here. And was it, I mean, the scriptures say that, the giants came from these spirits taking the daughters of man and born children with them. And that's forth this came giants. But I think some of these these creatures out here are giants themselves. There's a depiction of a flying serpent that must be 2 miles long, covering half of South Mountain. So yeah, these things are huge. And so yeah.
Yeah, a lot of strange things go on in this world. I wrote a book about supernatural, just turned it over to the publisher, and I studied a lot of stuff. And you mentioned biblical, and actually these giants were biblical in the Noah's days and the Nephilim, and they were something. Some of them were 25 feet tall, but the average Nephilim was something like 13 feet tall, I think.
Yeah, let's talk about these giants. So,
Yeah.
when Dave was talking to me about the giants, he was like, "Look on the east coast, on the east side over here," and he points to the Superstition Mountains. Now, the Superstition Mountains is very famous for the Lost Dutchman's gold mine, but according to the Native Americans, that mountain goes a lot deeper than just a German guy finding gold up there. It goes back to Noah's flood. And for instance, he's talking about that there was bloodthirsty giants that roamed this valley, and the water started to come. And the giants didn't want his people to drown. So he instructed all his people to stand up on this huge boulder. And when he did, he used his powers to raise this boulder up, but the waters kept coming. And he used his powers to raise this boulder up, but the waters kept coming. He used his powers so much now that this mountain or this boulder is as tall as the mountain, but the waters kept coming. And in his last bit of strength, because he didn't want his people to drown, he turned them all to stone. He immortalized them, and they turned them to stone. Now, when this happened, that's when the waters flood. That's when the waters stopped. And to this day, you can look upon the Superstition Mountains, and you can still see those giants still turned to stone, high up on hills, high up on the ridges. Sometimes, and some of them are down there on the bottom of the Superstition Mountains. And you can look upon the mountain, and you can still see the watermark where the water had stopped.
Wow. Yeah.
Mhm.
So do they look like human beings, these stoned beings, or what?
Some of them kind of do, but they're very tall, stick-looking formations that are coming up out of the mountain there. It's in my book if you want to like see what I'm talking about. So you can actually see,
Yeah.
yeah, you can actually see on, it looks like these big giants were turned to stone up there. Matter of fact, Camelback Mountain is great. There's a giant turned to stone there, and right there in front of Skull Rock. And that's really cool. So that's in my book also. So
That's
let's talk
cool.
about South
Yeah.
Mountain. Why
Okay.
have these lights been attracted to South Mountain for thousands of years? And not only South Mountain, but also other mountains around the world. The Native Americans, they tell us that they're going down into the underworld. Now, a scientific analysis on what they're really doing is they're going down into that fault line, into that energy source. And this seems to be the same case all over the planet on where to see these UFOs, is because of these fault lines, these ley lines, these energy lines. And I learned watching what was going on for many, many years, I learned that it was a pattern. Like the first year I watched, I noticed that they were here on certain months, and then other months there were maybe one, maybe two, and then the other months they came back, they were heavy, and then they were kind of gone, maybe one, maybe two, and then the next month it was very heavy, and this coincided with the equinox and the solstice, the changing of the sun. When the sun would get into the right position of these energy lines, it opened up a doorway. It caused a fusion effect, and it attracted these beings to the South Mountain. And when the sun moves, when the seasons change, now these beings aren't on South Mountain anymore. They're over there in Florida. They're over there in Paris. They're over there in Jerusalem. They're over there in Japan. The sun has moved. It's over a different ley line. And then when the seasons change, they're back over here now. That's when the South Mountains started to become active again. And it was a pattern here. And the Holocaust knew this also because they erected these huge stone boulders and put spirals on these boulders. When the equinox and the solstice casts a shadow on these spirals, it would cut a shadow and pierce that spiral. And this, as the sun would move to the sky,
Another little
so
quick glitch. That's Zoom for you, people.
yeah.
But
So yeah, that's basically what is going on here. This is why South Mountain is a hotspot for these Phoenix lights, if you will, for these UFOs, is because of the energy that's down below it. And remember, I mentioned earlier that there's a power plant on the east side. Those of you who want to investigate this, there's a power plant on the east side of South Mountain on Ray Road. Check it out. Look at my book. These lights are right over that power plant. When you look at my book, I show you where the power plant lights are, and these Phoenix lights are right over that power plant in 2004.
Wow. Now, the Phoenix Lights back in 1997, was that a craft, or was that
in my opinion, I mean, I'm an investigator. I'm looking for facts. I'm not looking for hearsay. Okay, I can only go on facts. All right, you can't go out on a limb and say something that you can't prove. And that's something that my research can prove. I can prove everything that I've been talking about here. And when it comes to the 1997 Phoenix Lights incident, I don't see any evidence of anything going over the city of Phoenix. Now, there were sky watchers out there. Why do we have what really happened that night? What happened that night? There was a string of lights on the west side of South Mountain. That was it. Did they move across the city? No. They simply did an arc, not a V formation. They did an arc. They were out there on the west side. Then they simply disappeared. And so it went from a handful of people seeing the lights to thousands and thousands of people seeing the lights, right? It just got blown way out of proportion. And in my opinion, in studying what was going on here, it's like being back in the third grade. Johnny fell off the swing set and he skinned his knee. But by the time it goes around the whole school, by the end of the day, Johnny's in the hospital. He's going to lose his leg. He might even lose his life. Oh my God, it just got blown way out of proportion, right?
Yeah.
And it just kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's what we're at now today.
Hey, your closing seconds, Jeff, your closing seconds.
Okay.
Yeah, let's close this out.
Okay, yeah, find me on Find me on Facebook, Jeff Woolwine, Petroglyphs in the Sky. Check out my book, The Covered Up History of Phoenix, Arizona, out there on Amazon and Kindle. Follow me on my Facebook page and YouTube channel, The Phoenix Lights, Petroglyphs in the Sky. And thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and sorry about all the glitches on Zoom. This is a paid subscription, and I expect the best out of it, but I'm not getting it. This has been a Dave Emmons show. Jeff Woolwine from Arizona. Fascinating stuff. I'll have to have him back on again. I've had him before, so I always enjoy his company on the air. Thank you very much, everybody, for taking an interest, and have a good evening. Bye-bye.